Imagine stepping onto a continent where winters bite hard and summers can empty a man in a single day, and yet the people here are not starving. They're strong, steady, and astonishingly healthy, living on foods that break every rule the colonists believe about proper nutrition. While European settlers scribble in journals about hunger and sickness, Native American families are feeding their children dishes that fuel long hunts, keep muscles warm in blizzards, and quietly guard against the very illnesses that are emptying ships and settlements. The secret isn't a miracle berry or a single superfood, it's a system, patient, practical, and perfected over centuries, where every calorie works, every season has a plan, and every recipe carries the memory of those who survived before you. Start on the plains, where the horizon is a straight line and the wind never tires. A hunter kneels beside a small leather bundle, unties the sinew, and shows his son a dull, unremarkable block, pemmican. This is survival made portable. First, the meat, bison most days, elk or deer when that's what the land offers, is sliced thin as paper and dried until it snaps like a twig, because moisture is the enemy and winter is ruthless. That brittle meat is pounded to powder, then folded into rendered fat that seals out air like a lid on a jar. Sometimes, crushed berries join the mix, chokecherry or blueberry, adding brightness, vitamins, and just enough tart to cut the richness. Done right, this dense brick can last months, even years, without turning. 1 pound can carry a person for days, more than 3,000 fierce, necessary calories tucked into a palm-sized promise that blizzards and bad luck won't win. It rides in a pouch on buffalo hunts, hides in family caches beneath stones against lean seasons, fuels scouts who don't know whether the next horizon means water or another long stretch of grass. It's not fancy. It's perfect. But survival isn't only forged over fire and wind. Sometimes it grows quietly in a garden that looks simple until you listen to what the plants are saying to one another. Cross the plains into fields tended by hands that know the sky, and you'll find the 3 sisters, corn, beans, and squash, standing together like family in a story told 1,000 times and still true. The corn reaches up first, straight and strong, a living ladder. The beans spiral and climb, nodding thank you by fixing nitrogen into the soil, feeding the whole patch. The squash stays low, wide leaves shading the ground, holding moisture, shouldering out weeds, keeping the roots cool when the sun insists on being cruel. It looks like common sense because it is, but it's also ecological genius. No wasted space, no tired soil, no one plant left to do all the work. When the sisters meet in the pot, corn for complex carbohydrates, beans for complete protein, squash for vitamins and fiber, the result is more than a stew, it's a balanced meal designed by patience and carried by seasons. The Iroquois tend it, the Cherokee depend on it, and year after year the soil stays generous because the sisters are good to one another. This isn't miracle farming, it's thoughtful farming that makes miracles unnecessary. And still, the story deepens in the forests where the oaks keep their own calendar and food hangs in the balance between bitterness and wisdom. At first glance, acorns are a dare, plentiful yes, but mouth-puckering bitter with tannins that laugh at hunger. California tribes, the Miwok, the Yokuts and many more, turn that dare into dinner with a process so patient it becomes a kind of prayer. The nuts are gathered when the trees say yes, cracked open, and ground to meal on stones worn smooth by generations. Then comes the washing, the leaching, the slow coaxing of bitterness into the stream, acorn flour in finely woven baskets, cool water poured through again and again until the tannins surrender and the meal tastes like possibility instead of punishment. It's like doing laundry for your dinner, except you're laundering out what keeps you from eating it all. When the water runs clear, the acorn meal is ready for fire, boiled into thick, comforting mush, sometimes studded with herbs or berries, sometimes left plain and proud. White oak lends sweetness, black oak brings a robust depth. Each species has a voice, and the cooks, often women whose skill is measured in satisfied silence, know them all. Harvests vary, blight happens, but oaks are steady elders, and a good acorn year fills bellies long after the last leaf falls. There's pride here and play, who can make the silkiest porridge, whose basket weeps least bitterness, whose mush holds its shape just so on a wooden spoon. Call it a competition if you like, they call it keeping a family fed. Look closely and you'll see the same pattern in every dish. Remove what harms, keep what helps, build something that lasts. Pemmican removes water and encloses strength and fat so it won't die. The sisters remove waste by sharing labor and renewing the soil so it won't fail. Acorns remove bitterness by giving it back to the stream, and what's left warms the bowl and the body alike. While colonists argue with their own customs and starve on the edge of abundance, these kitchens, fireside, riverside, roadside, behave like laboratories with better instincts than instruments. The recipes are simple, the thinking is not. And this is only the beginning. Because beyond the oak groves and garden rows waits a coastline where fish turn silver in the firelight, and a desert where even a spiny cactus becomes supper if you know where to place your knife. The rulebook that failed the settlers doesn't apply out here. The land writes its own, and the people who listen eat well. By the time the first frost glazed the rivers, the people who knew the land best had already filled their stores with food that could outlast the season. In the oak-covered hills, baskets of ground acorn meal dried in the sun, each one proof that patience could turn bitterness into life. But if you followed the scent of smoke and salt westward, to the shimmering rivers and endless coasts, you'd find a different kind of wisdom crackling over open flames. The Pacific Northwest, the Great Lakes, the winding rivers of the interior, these were places where water meant food. Fish weren't just caught, they were celebrated, cooked, and honored with rituals that tied families to the rhythm of migration. When the salmon returned each year, the camps came alive. Children watched as the silver bodies flashed through shallow water, their scales catching sunlight like shards of glass. Men cast woven nets or speared with precision learned through generations, every motion an echo of those who'd done it before. Cooking was never just about eating. Fire roasting fish was an art form, a performance, a science of timing. Split open along the spine, pinned to wooden stakes and angled near the fire. Not in it, never in it. The fish cooked in its own oils until the skin crisped and the flesh turned the color of dawn. Too close to the heat and you'd lose the precious oils that nourished the body. Too far, and the meat stayed raw. There was no thermometer, only instinct, wind, and the sound of fat dripping into coals. The result was more than dinner, it was survival disguised as perfection. Salmon, trout, sturgeon, catfish, each had its own place and season. And every region, every family had its secret, a particular wood for the fire, a pinch of local herb, or the angle that made the skin blister just right. The first taste after a long journey was sacred. In some places, the first fish of the season was never eaten by the catcher. It was offered back to the river, its bones buried in the soil, a promise of gratitude and return. Even food was part of a conversation with the earth, a dialogue built on respect rather than demand. Further south and east, where rivers gave way to red dust and stone, the world changed color, and so did the food. There, under a sun that didn't forgive, people learned to eat what others feared to touch. The prickly pear cactus, the nopal, stood defiant, its green pads bristling with spines that warned, "Look but touch carefully." To the untrained eye, it was a threat. To the Apache and Pueblo peoples, it was dinner, medicine, and water all at once. Harvesting, it was an act of precision. Spines had to be burned or scraped away before slicing into the pad's juicy flesh. Preparing cactus meant disarming it first, nature's reminder that even nourishment can wound the careless. Once cleaned, the pads could be boiled into tender strips, roasted until smoky, or eaten raw when young and soft. The taste surprised newcomers, tangy, lemon-bright, clean. A salad grown in a desert, a living source of hydration when wells ran dry. And inside that unassuming green flesh, miracles of chemistry. Fiber that fed the gut, vitamin C that kept scurvy at bay, minerals that restored strength. The nopal was a healer disguised as a vegetable. A plant that turned the hardest landscapes into places where life could still taste sweet. Even the fruits, the deep red tunas, offered syrupy sugar when sugar was nowhere else to be found. Together, the cactus and its fruit carried entire communities through dry months that could break weaker souls. When you step back, the genius becomes clear. The northern forests, the western rivers, the southern deserts, each held its own flavor, but the pattern never changed. Knowledge shaped every bite. Fish grilled to keep its oils, acorns leached to remove poison, cactus stripped and cooked to transform danger into strength. Nothing was wasted. Nothing was random. It was as if the land itself had written recipes, and generations had learned to read them by firelight. To outsiders, it looked primitive, just people cooking over open flames, eating plants and roots. But the truth is, this was nutritional engineering at its highest form. Every meal was a balance of fat, protein and fiber, tuned by experience rather than textbooks. These weren't survival foods made in desperation. They were creations made from understanding. And that understanding didn't end at the shore or the desert's edge. Travel north, where the world turns to ice, and you'll see a different brilliance altogether. One that looks impossible to those who've never felt the Arctic wind on bare skin. In that white silence, where wood won't burn and water freezes harder than stone, the next chapter of survival is written not in fire, but in fat. Head north, beyond the treeline where the world becomes a mirror of white and silence, and you'll find people who learn to live where even the sun seems hesitant to rise. To outsiders, the Arctic looks uninhabitable, a frozen wasteland that devours the unprepared. Yet for the Inuit and coastal tribes who call it home, it is a well-stocked pantry, if you know how to read it. The secret is written in blubber, the fuel that warms, heals, and sustains. When temperatures fall so low that steel shatters and breath turns to ice before it leaves your mouth, the human body burns through calories like fire through dry wood. In that world, fat isn't the enemy, it's salvation. Whale and seal blubber served as both food and heat, eaten raw, boiled, or fermented, depending on the season. A single serving carried thousands of calories, energy dense enough to power the body through long hunts and endless nights. It wasn't just sustenance, it was survival distilled. Fresh blubber shimmered like translucent gold. Hunters would slice it into cubes and share it immediately after a successful kill. Raw, pure, still warm from the ocean. The first bite wasn't about taste, it was about respect. Every part of the animal had purpose, every use a form of gratitude. The oil burned in lamps, the fat fueled the body, and nothing was wasted. To a culture that thrived in the most unforgiving climate on Earth, waste was the only true sin. Then came the innovation of fermentation, controlled decay turned into nourishment. Stored in seal skins or buried beneath permafrost, the blubber transformed over weeks into something new, softer, richer, alive with probiotics that strengthened digestion and provided vitamins scarce in other foods. While Europeans were just beginning to understand bacteria as a threat, these Arctic scientists were already using it as an ally. Fermented blubber was ancient science disguised as dinner. Move south again, where the air softens and lakes shimmer under the sun. Here, the Great Lakes tribes, Ojibwe, Menominee, and others, found their own treasures hiding in the shallows: wild rice. It wasn't rice at all, but the seed of aquatic grass that waved like dark silk over the water. When autumn came, canoes glided between the stalks, and harvesters bent them gently, knocking the ripe grains into the hull with smooth wooden sticks. The rhythm was soft and steady, a quiet song between human and water. The rice was parched over open fires, winnowed, and stored in bark containers to last through winter. When paired with duck, fish, or venison, it became more than food, it became balance. Wild rice offered complex carbohydrates, protein, and fiber. The game added fat and flavor. Together they created a complete meal that fueled entire communities. Wild rice and duck soup was comfort and sustenance blended into one. A dish that warmed hearts as much as bodies. Even the process of cooking was communal. Families gathered around steaming pots, children waiting for the first ladleful, elders telling stories that kept history alive as long as the fire burned. Every meal carried memory. Food wasn't just eaten, it was shared, taught, remembered. Further east, when the snow began to thaw and the sap started to flow, sweetness returned to the forests. The maple trees, tall and patient, began their spring gift. The northeastern tribes, Abenaki, Haudenosaunee, Algonquin, knew the rhythm by heart. Tapping the trees wasn't just harvesting, it was ceremony. The first drops of sap were collected with reverence, boiled down slowly in wide kettles until the clear liquid turned amber, thick and fragrant. 40 gallons of sap became 1 gallon of syrup. It was labor measured in patience, but the reward was energy, clean, quick, and pure. Syrup sweetened porridge, toughened travelers, and could be boiled further into sugar cakes that lasted through months of cold. Maple sugar wasn't a luxury, it was stored sunshine. Each spring harvest was a celebration, a promise that the long dark had ended, and sweetness still existed in the world. From Arctic blubber to wild rice, from duck broth to maple syrup, these foods weren't random adaptations. They were lessons written in hunger, weather, and time. Each region had its own logic, its own flavor, its own proof that humans could thrive anywhere if they respected the rules written by the land itself. To the colonists, these practices seemed primitive: fat eaten raw, sap boiled for days, grass seeds harvested from lakes. But the truth? These were systems of knowledge older and more refined than any cookbook they brought from across the sea. These weren't desperate meals. They were perfectly tuned engines built by experience and respect. And yet, even this deep wisdom wasn't the end. Because farther south, where the forests thickened and cornfields rolled under the sun, another revolution in survival was waiting. One made from clay pots, cornmeal, and the ingenious chemistry that would save countless lives. South of the frozen lands, where rivers ran wide and fertile soil stretched toward the horizon, another kind of mastery was unfolding. One that turned chemistry, fire, and community into survival. Here, in the villages of the southeast and woodlands, native peoples cracked a code that science wouldn't explain for centuries. It began with corn, not as a crop, but as a puzzle. To European settlers, corn was a simple grain. To indigenous farmers, it was life itself. But corn, eaten alone, hides a deadly secret. Its nutrients are locked inside, unreachable unless you know how to set them free. Tribes across Mesoamerica and the American South discovered the key long before microscopes or laboratories. A process now called nixtamalization. The method looked simple: soak ground corn in water mixed with wood ash or lime, rinse, grind, cook. But what it did was revolutionary. The alkaline water unlocked niacin, a vital nutrient that prevented a disease settlers would later call pellagra, a slow, wasting illness that devastated communities living on unprocessed corn. Indigenous science had quietly solved it centuries earlier. They didn't just make food, they made medicine. When cooked into masa, this new dough became the foundation for tamales, tortillas, and cornbread. Flexible, portable, nourishing, food designed to move as people moved. The southeastern tribes took it further, baking dense cakes of cornmeal mixed with water and fat in clay pots buried beneath coals. The result was a travel bread that lasted for weeks, light to carry yet heavy with sustenance. Each piece could fuel a hunter for days. To the untrained eye, it looked primitive, just corn and clay. But it was more advanced than most modern nutrition. Every element had a purpose. Clay pots held heat evenly, sealing in moisture without burning. The slow baking transformed texture and flavor, turning simple ingredients into something close to indestructible. It was field ration, comfort food, and science lesson all in one. When the harvest turned golden and the chill returned to the air, another miracle appeared in the fields. Pumpkins heavy and bright, lying like suns against the dying grass. Northeastern tribes turned these into pumpkin and wild herb stews, cooking directly inside the hollowed fruit. Meat, beans, and broth were poured in, then the whole pumpkin placed among glowing coals. As it cooked, the walls softened, flavor seeped inward, and by the time it was ready, the pot itself had become part of the meal. Imagine that, a dinner cooked inside its own skin, the sweetness of pumpkin melting into savory broth and herbs gathered from the forest. Wild onions, sage, and garlic added warmth and depth. When families gathered around those coals, breaking through the pumpkin's tender shell to share the steaming meal inside, it wasn't just food. It was celebration, a feast marking survival, harvest, and togetherness. And in those same seasons, when bones from hunts piled high, nothing was wasted. From what remained, tribes made bone broth, long simmered, rich, and restorative. Large bison or deer bones were cracked open for marrow, boiled in clay pots or stone-lined pits until the water turned milky with fat and minerals. The process took hours, sometimes days. What emerged was liquid strength, collagen turned to gelatin, calcium and iron drawn from the bones themselves. This broth was survival in its purest form. A drinkable meal that healed wounds, strengthened joints, and restored energy after brutal winters. Sometimes it was reduced to a thick gel, dried into portable cakes that could be rehydrated on the trail, ancient instant soup without packaging or preservatives. Every region, every tribe, had its own masterpiece. Some added herbs for healing, others wild roots for flavor. But one rule held true across all: nothing of the hunt was ever wasted. The bones, the hide, the fat, even the ash from the fire found purpose. Waste meant weakness, and weakness was a luxury they couldn't afford. Yet amid all this practicality, there was joy. During good seasons, when food was abundant, the people came together to cook communal stews, great simmering pots that combined whatever nature had given that year. Fish, meat, corn, wild greens, all mixed into a feast large enough for everyone. These gatherings were more than meals. They were living stories. As the pot bubbled, elders spoke of hunts, migrations, and the spirits of the land. Children learned history not from scrolls or sermons, but from the aroma of stew and the sound of their ancestors' voices. To the outside world, these foods seemed primitive. But in truth, they were the earliest forms of precision nutrition, perfectly balanced combinations of fat, protein, carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals, born not from guesswork but generations of testing, observation, and memory. And that's what makes this story so striking. While settlers starved on civilized diets and feared the wild, Native Americans dined on balance, variety, and respect, a culinary science older than history itself. They didn't just survive. They thrived. So next time you sit down to eat, ask yourself, how much of what we call modern is really just rediscovered wisdom?